Okay, first dish we're going to do is Oriental Coleslaw. And this is actually, I think my mom got this out of the San Francisco Chronicle years ago, because she always would make this, and it's a good crowd pleaser. And unlike your traditional coleslaw, it doesn't have a ton of mayonnaise in it. It's just got the only fat in it we're going to put in is a little bit of sesame oil. So it's actually pretty nutritious coleslaw versus tons of mayo, which is mostly fat. And I'm going to use some sugar, and you don't have to use sugar. You could use a little bit of NutraSweet or Splenda. The one thing that you got to keep in mind is sugar and vinegar are what sort of cook your coleslaw. So that's why when you eat coleslaw, it's not super crunchy. It's wilted, and it's actually the chemical of the sugar and the vinegar that makes that occur. Woo! I'm burning my cashews. Would you give me some more cashews, please? That's the other thing is I'm going to say the wrong thing. You can burn your cashews very easily, so you got to keep an eye on them. So that's why I'm doing burnt cashew salad tomorrow. Okay. And the hearts you want to cut out of the cabbage. And actually, my mom used to always. This was my favorite part. She would save these for me, and I put a little salt in my hand, and it's great. Anyway, just for the salad, you don't want to include that. And then you want to do a really nice thin slice. So you take off the top, and just really thin slice. You could use a Cuisinart, and also they sell cabbage already shredded for you, but what you want is really thin slice. And the thinner you slice it, also, the less time it's going to take for it to chemically cook. Now, as far as the ingredients, I put generally the same things in it every time I make it, but it doesn't mean you can't add your favorite ingredients to it as well. Do some type of variation. And you could make it a creamy one as well. The only thing you'd want to do is pour off the excess vinegar at the end. So we're going to get, actually I'm going to use this bowl because it's bigger. You want to get especially if you're in a rush and you're doing this for a party that night, add your vinegar first, and that'll get it cooking as well as the sugar. This is balsamic, and I love balsamic. It's got a little bit of sugar in it as well, so we don't need to use as much sugar. And you could use powdered sugar. It really doesn't, sugar is sugar, but you'll find that by the time this stuff is ready, that sugar will have dissolved. And we also want to put a little bit of salt in there as well. And I got some kosher salt here. So we got that. In essence, we're cooking our cabbage without a flame. Sort of the same philosophy as ceviche. Ceviche is salt and vinegar and lime juice or lemon juice, and that'll chemically cook your fish. The other nice thing about this salad is all the color. The purple's so blatant, I guess is the right word. And I got some fresh basil here. And the fresh basil, what you want to do is just pinch off the stems and put all your leaves together like this. And then just hold like that. And then you do almost the same thing as you want really thin slices. This is called chiffonade if you're into French cookery, which most chefs are French trained. And the reason we're French trained is because there's so many things you learn how to cook in French cooking that apply to almost all other cooking. So when we talk about, different techniques or cuts, we usually are talking French. My culinary French is excellent. My speaking French is terrible. even though I took 2 years. I was up in Canada one time, and I was at the airport, and I was looking at the menu, and I was reading it. I was reading the English side, and I didn't realize that I turned around, I was reading the French side. I was just reading it, and I went, gosh, they got a lot of the same stuff on both sides of the menu, and of course, it was one side was English and one side was French. Yeah. You want to do the same thing with your cilantro. You can throw the stems in it. Something, especially like salad like this, it isn't going to matter. Did I get some more cashews? Oh, there they are. These we'll save for later in the garbage can, and we'll try it again. Also, a good nut for this recipe is almonds, slivered almonds or the sliced almonds. Both do a good job. You can do these in the oven, and if you're going to do them in the oven, just do them at a lower temperature, like 250, and you're not going to burn them. It'll give the color and the toastiness that you want to add to the cashew or almonds. I think chefs burn nuts, croutons, and bacon the most. And you always know when your nose goes, oh no, it's too late. And we do some fresh garlic. Now, there's so many different ways of chopping your garlic, but my favorite technique is the back side of the knife. And what I do is I shave the garlic off with the back side of the knife. A lot of people go, you're using the knife wrong. So I didn't know. Yes, we got our garlic in there. Yeah, well, that's what these shows are all about. Now, this is sesame oil, and sesame oil is a very strong oil. It's not, you could never fry in it because it would it's almost too bitter at that point. It's really like cinnamon. Cinnamon smells great, but you put it on your tongue, you're like, that's why we put a ton of sugar on our cinnamon toast. Sesame oil is the same way. It's almost more for the nose and just a little bit of flavor. You don't want to use a lot. And soy sauce, we got a little bit of salt in there, but the soy sauce will add another dimension as far as that goes. And got to have green onions. Actually, since I'll show you guys a garnish technique. You ever gone to a Chinese restaurant and they got these onions that are all curled up? Do you know how they do that? Well, I can't curl them for you because I don't have a bowl of ice water, but let's say that was a bowl of ice water. What you want to do is you just chop it like that, and then draw your knife down through it so you get all these thin slices, and you put that in ice water, and they'll all curl up in about 15-20 minutes. You can just throw them in the fridge when you're... Did it again! Maybe we shouldn't put cashews in this dish. Let me chop the onions. You guys aren't helping. You're supposed to keep an eye on the cashews for me.
I'll watch them.
I wonder how my croutons are doing.
I burn the buns every time.
It burned the buns, yeah.
Every time.
And of course, those are bean sprouts. Do not use canned bean sprouts. I don't think there's anything more disgusting in the world than canned bean sprouts. I can't believe I did that. So you know what I could do is actually saute them in a little bit of butter. That way I could watch them. So this dish is also really good with raw cashews. You might want to try that. And that's what we're going to do today is raw cashews because I just frankly given up. Blast those onions in there. Just give them a little bit of a chop. Okay. Now the top ramen, you can make this part ahead of time. But the top ramen you just want to add right at the last minute because you want to keep them nice and crunchy. And it's funny, you make this and a lot of people go, what are those little squiggly things in there? And everybody always laughs when they find out it's top ramen. And here's the technique is how we make our top ramen pieces. Top ramen, for those of you who don't know, are actually fried noodles. They fry them. That's why there's so much fat in them. And that's why they cook up so fast. Because they're in essence already cooked. Not the most nutritional thing in the world, but... And do not put in the flavor packet. That you can throw away. There we go. Now, if in a perfect world we had a little bit more time, you might want to wait, say, 10-15 minutes. Let that sugar just cook it down a little bit more and soften up the cabbage. But I think you guys will find that this is actually pretty tasty the way it is. There's all these wonderful colors. And since we have all this beautiful basil right here, get a perfect leaf. And then you could also garnish it if you have one of those nice curly onions as well. So right there we've got our Oriental Coleslaw. Would you guys like to try some? I often cook with Dover sole, mostly because there's not a lot of really good fresh fish in Vegas, and if you're just going down to Albertsons, Dover sole almost is always fresh, and it's also a light fish. It cooks really fast. It's nice and thin, and I just like it. So the first thing we're going to do is add some flavor to the fish before we bread it. And so I'm going to put a little bit of soy sauce and just a tiny bit of sesame oil. And honey. I didn't mean that to anybody in particular. You could use a little bit of sugar. If you're diabetic, you could use a little bit of Splenda as well. And got to have some fresh garlic on this. This will be one of the best parts of the flavor of the fish. Now another thing you can do if you want is we're gonna beat an egg and then do the breadcrumbs at the last minute. And sometimes I'll marinate this, especially if it's a thicker piece of fish. This is great with like sea bass. It's just phenomenal sea bass. And if you want to add the flavor, put everything into a Ziploc and beat an egg and throw that in there as well. So all you have to do is take it right out of the bag, into the breadcrumbs, and into the pan. And the garlic on this, you want a pretty fine mince because we want to be able to really flavor across the fish. So I'm going to give this a few extra chops. You guys have any questions? No one's asked a question yet. Group. Now I'm going to sort of smear that around with my hands, get all the flavors onto the fish. And you want to get both sides. I mean, on this fish, it isn't really going to matter because it's so thin that flavoring both sides. But if you're doing sea bass, something like that, that's why the Ziploc technique works so well. Okay. I just realized I better take my puff pastry out of the box or we're going to have trouble making something with it at the end. So I'm just going to set this aside. It's not going to sit out too long, so we don't have to worry about it getting too too warm. It'll be fine by the time we're ready. Now, the the mistake that turned out pretty good by doing something else with. You want a short grain rice, and don't read the instructions. Just overcook it. And we're going to throw an egg in there, and the egg will sort of help pull the both the rice and the breadcrumbs together. Now breadcrumbs, these are panko, which are a Japanese breadcrumbs. You could use Italian breadcrumbs, whatever you want. What's that?
Why are they higher and lighter, and is it just the rice, or is it the way they're made into breadcrumbs?
It's the type of bread that they use to make the breadcrumbs. It's just a really light bread. The Japanese, if they're going to eat a pastry or a bread, it's almost always super light. It's not very dense, whereas you take a sourdough bread and you're going to get, very solid breadcrumbs.
Made of rice?
I don't think so. No, I think it's just regular flour. Yeah, bleached wheat flour. Yeah. Let's see. Need some pepper in there. I'll get our pan going. Actually, I'll use this pan. And just a touch of olive oil in there. And we're going to use some red onions. And really, this you can throw whatever you like in there. It's really up to you. The most important part is the overcooked rice and the breadcrumbs and the eggs to hold it together. Now, if you want to add even more of a dimension to these, saute your onions ahead of time. You could do some grilled red bell peppers. Really anything you think of putting in there, you can. I love red onions. Red onions and I always have onions in the house. Onions and garlic, you can almost do anything with.
I love the idea you can take something wrecked, which is the rice, and I am famous for that.
Screwing it up and making something better.
I make the world's worst rice.
Do you?
Tried even a boreal, everything. I mean,
There was
lousy rice.
There was a technique that a chef taught me, and it does work. If you got a pan, 2 knuckles, right? Or two joints on your finger. The first joint, you do rice,
This way.
right? Fill it up there. Fill the second up with water. Bring it to a boil, turn it down, let it simmer. Almost always comes out right. Yeah.
Unless you leave it on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you make rice pancakes. Now, you could saute these in oil, but it's just going to come out so much better if you do butter. This is definitely one of those dishes that butter just does a better job. And put a little of that on the side. Oh, I'm burning the butter. If your butter's starting to burn, take the pan off the stove and start wishing it around, and the cold butter will cool down the pan. Okay, this is where we get to play with our food. And you just want to make these ahead of time if you want. You can throw them on a pan and actually chill them. Or if I have a big party, I'll go ahead and cook them up, and then put them on a sheet pan, and then about 10 minutes before I'm ready to serve, I'll throw them into a 350-degree oven. Just heat them back up. Yeah. They're thick enough that the moisture on the inside will still be good. And so when you're doing these, you're sort of patting down and pushing it at the same time with your thumb. So that way they won't get too thin. And if they're not sticking together, it means you didn't screw up your rice enough. Or you might need a little bit more egg in there and some more breadcrumbs. But as long as you can get them like this, once they start sauteing, they usually, these are the rice cakes that are bad for you, though. But I've added all sorts of things, Parmesan cheese, feta cheese, just go to town on it. They really are, as you'll see in a few minutes, they really are tasty.
Great idea.
Well, it's fun to screw up on something and then actually make something better in the end. And it's something you can do with leftover rice. If you have some leftover rice, you order some Chinese, just cook it up some more and screw it up on purpose, and then you can make rice pancakes. I love crunchy things, so that's probably another reason I like these so much. I don't eat fried food very often, but I love it, I have to admit. Okay, wash my hands. Okie doke. Now I'm also going to do some sauteed vegetables with these. And the vegetables I've chosen for today are zucchini and mushrooms. And mostly because I like zucchini and mushrooms, so people tend to get to eat what I like. On the mushrooms, we'll get those going first because they're going to take a little bit more time. And what we want to do when we cook our mushrooms is, mushrooms are so funny that all the moisture in mushrooms are sort of locked in there. And unless you, oh good, grab matches and it magically ignites. You want to cook your mushrooms at a sort of a low heat in the beginning, or at least with some moisture. And what you'll notice is, at first they seem like they don't want to cook. And then all that moisture will just all of a sudden start coming out of the mushroom. And that's when we really get the great flavor in the mushroom. This as well. Give these guys a quick rinse. We got the rice pancakes on a medium heat, and we'll just keep our eye on those. And these you can slice, but I like to quarter them because I like the texture and I like the look. And we've got to put some wine in there. Let's see, we got some marsala. Now we get to have a flame. Pyrotechnic time. Come on, ignite. Oh, that's a pretty lame flame. I have some water in there, sorry. We'll do it one more time in a minute. And what that'll do is it'll pull out the flavors and get the mushrooms cooking. And we want a little bit of butter in there. And I'm going to do a little bit of butter and just a little bit of olive oil as well. Now butter, if you clarify it, do you guys know what clarified butter is? It's when you melt a bunch of butter and the solids will go to the top. And in essence, you have the oil, and then the water-based part will go to the bottom. And when you clarify butter, the reason that chefs use clarified butter all the time is it has a much lower burning temperature, so it won't brown as easy. So if you're sauteing something at a high heat, you can generally get a little bit more temperature out of it. Just going to have a look at this guy. And they need to go a little bit longer. You guys can see how they're looking. Want a little bit crispier on the bottom. And we'll get our zucchini ready to go. Now if you want to get fancy with your zucchini look, there's a couple things you can do. If you have a peeler, or you're good with a knife, you can do this. This also looks good on cucumbers when you're doing a crudité or a vegetable tray. And I always play with, how I cut. I'm always trying something different. And, I'll do this, and sometimes I'll quarter it and stuff like that. But, play with your food. Make it look different. But when you're cutting vegetables and you're going to throw them all in at the same time, make sure they're all about the same size. And that way you'll get even cooking. If I do one really thin and then one really thick, one will be mushy and one will be, undercooked. So it is important to try to get everything in a uniform size. And my vegetables, kids even like usually. One other thing I'll do with vegetables, especially if kids don't like vegetables, is a little bit of chicken bouillon. That'll help the flavor a lot. And we've got to have some garlic in here. And now we'll get this pan going. Hopefully. I'll grab the matches. Need to clean that igniter off. And I'm going to take the puff pastry out because we're going to use it in a few minutes. So when you're getting ready to do this, just take the puff pastry out of the container, set it down on the countertop. You don't want it to get too soft because once it gets too soft, then it sticks. This is actually pretty good, so it'll be fine to use. We're ready. Okay, mushrooms are looking good. They're getting nice color on them, and that color really brings out the flavor in the mushroom. Wait, you guys will notice me try those. I'm going to turn that way low and have a look at my rice pancakes. I turned the heat up on those, and yeah, they're getting wonderful. Just how I like them. This is one of the best screw-ups dishes I've ever done. You're going to be the rice pancake queen. Okay. And actually, I'm just going to turn that off because those mushrooms are the way I want them. And I'm going to throw the garlic in there, and that'll get the flavor going out of the garlic. And I'm just going to throw these in here so they're ready to go when I'm ready to plate. Because the zucchini cooks pretty fast, so we're really just going to put a little bit of color on it and finish them off. Put a little bit of salt on those. Of course, you're going to have some pepper. Okie doke. I got my egg here. Grab a fresh fork. Now, I often will make something with breadcrumbs, and it's almost always fish, and usually has some leftover breadcrumbs. Throw them in a Ziploc bag, throw them in the freezer, and you can use them next time. Nothing's going to happen to them, they won't go bad or anything like that. And you don't waste your breadcrumbs. I turn the heat down on those because they're just getting, that pan's gained a lot of heat. Okay, throw the egg on there, and we'll get some butter going. Need a fair amount of butter for this because we're going to a couple fillets there. And go ahead and get the egg wash on your fish. And so my pan's hot, almost too hot for the fish will cool it down, so I just go right in there. Turn my heat down. Now, if you really like breaded, one technique is you egg wash your bread, you egg wash again, and bread again, and then you'll get a really thick crust if you want. But I tend to go lighter on almost everything I cook. And because fish sort of tends to shrink, you can put a little bit more fish that will fit in the pan. Yeah. Let's leave this one on the side. I think we can still get in there. I know the crew will eat it. This probably has the best employee lunch in the country, this place. Okay. Now this may seem a little bit different, but I'm going to just make up a little bit of strawberry salsa. And I love cooking with fruit, and I think fruit goes so well with fish. It really does. I got a little bit of garlic left, so I'm just going to chop that and use that in my strawberry salsa. And if it's fresh and in season, strawberries now are a good price and plentiful. That's why I'm using them. This also is good with mangoes. Mangoes, I tend to buy the ones that are already in the jar, cleaned. If you look at the price difference, it's a better deal. It really is. You get usually a mango is a couple bucks, where the jarred ones that are fresh, you get a couple of mangoes for about half the price. If you think about actually how much meat you get at the end of the day. And some red onions. Chop that a little bit more. You just want to leave a little bit of onion not cut through so it stays together. And you can use lemon juice, you can use some vinegar. The balsamic is actually quite good in this. And it's got the sweetness too, which adds the flavor. But I've always just been a huge fan of fruit and cooking. I like the combination. I think the first place I ever had anything like that, I was a little kid, and my father's New Zealander. And New Zealand, especially in those days, in the 70s and 80s, was not known for its food. That's why my dad left New Zealand, because the food was so bad. And I went to a restaurant, and they had orange roughy, and they served it with sauteed bananas. And it was awesome. It was so good. They just did a little bit of butter, sauteed the orange roughy, and it was fantastic. And I guess that's probably when I got my... Okay, these are ready to flip. Whoop. So one thing about this fish is it will fall apart very easily. Sometimes what I do with this fish is I'll go ahead and just put a little bit of color on one side and flip it, and then it doesn't really have a chance to soften up too much. So you got to be real delicate with this. So take your time. Probably didn't help that I crowded these guys in there, but let's get it right. As you notice, we tend to use our hands a lot in cooking because, often we are dealing with something very delicate, and if we just relied on the spatula, we'd have shredded fish. So it's okay. And the top side's not that hot yet, so. Just one piece in the center. Okie doke. And throw the cilantro in there. Actually, since we're sort of doing an Asian theme, I'll go ahead and use a little bit more soy sauce in that. Actually, for the amount of people we have, we probably should do a couple more strawberries. Another thing about strawberries, strawberries don't like water. So when you bring your strawberries home, don't rinse them off right away. Rinse them right before you use them, because the strawberries will make them mushy and discolor and eventually moldy, actually. They're so delicate. They actually have I guess you could call it a fungus that they developed for strawberries, and it prevents the freeze from affecting the strawberry. but it doesn't affect the look or the texture or anything of the strawberry. Okay, since we're almost done, I'm going to go ahead and get this cooking again so that our vegetables be just right. And what I'm going to add to that is, let's see if I got some Parmesan cheese in here. Maybe I don't. Well, if you had some Parmesan cheese, you might want to throw it in. But don't we have Parmesan cheese back there? Oh, in the drawer? Thank you. There's 3 drawers. Well, it's not that one. There's no Parmesan in the drawer. It'll still be good without the Parmesan cheese. I'll be cooking something. Oh, that'd be good in there. That'd be good in there, and I'll add it at the last minute. Okay, I'm gonna bring that up and give this a little bit of a mix. And also, since I like spicy things, I would probably put some hot sauce in my fruit salsa. Get ready to plate. Oh, I was going to throw a little fresh corn in there. That's right. If you've got a corn shucker, it's a good way to go. That white corn is so sweet and crunchy that I love it raw. I often just eat it right off the cob. Okay. Got a plate. You know, plates are also, what plate you choose to put your food on adds, color. Think about the plates you own or the plates you're going to buy. A plate almost is a form of garnish. In a way, it really affects how the food looks. Ah, those are perfect. Turn those off. Another reason I like the salsa on this is we sort of have a brown theme going, as you might notice. And the salsa will add a little bit of extra color to it. Let me put the salsa right on the fish. And just do a little bit more salt. And there we got it. We got our rice pancakes with sauteed fish, strawberry salsa, and sauteed mushrooms and zucchini. Beautiful. You guys want to try some? Yeah. Be sure. Okay, this is actually a great recipe for this size group of people. And puff pastry, I don't know if you guys know anything about puff pastry, but what you do and to make it, almost no one makes it. Even major pastry chefs that I know, they still buy their own, just because it's such a hassle. What you have to do is make a big block of dough and a big butter block, and then you wrap the dough in the butter block, and then you roll it out, you fold, and you roll it out, and by the time you're finished, you've got hundreds of layers of dough, butter. So when it hits the heat, it expands and gives us this great pastry. But like I told you guys, I am not one to do a lot of work when it comes to making dessert. So this is definitely a John recipe. And really, you can put any fresh fruit you want. Anything that's really watery, like oranges, I would use a limited amount of oranges. They'd be good for adding flavor, but just use some thin slices. But your berries, anything like peaches, especially if they're fresh, they go well in this. You know what? I need another egg, please. Just remembered. It's quite the eggy day.
There's some mango in the refrigerator.
Oh. And while this is baking, we'll have a few minutes to chat. If you guys have any questions you want to think of between now. Well, I'll show you in a minute. Are you familiar? Are you like pomegranates?
She loves the juice. She loves everything right now.
Have you been drinking that Palm Wonderful?
Yes.
Well, it's made by the same company. And what it is, the chefs were taking the pomegranate juice and they were reducing it. You know, you put it on a stove and you cook it down until it's like a syrup. And so they decided to come out with a syrup that you could use in cooking.
Quick retouch?
Yeah. And actually, I've got a bottle of it at home, and I will just make up my own pomegranate juice. I'll just squirt it in there, throw some ice water, and you've got the pomegranate juice. Have you tried their pomegranate iced teas? Oh, they're very good. Very, very good.
We need a Merlot reduction.
A Merlot reduction? Yeah. When you do a wine reduction, you got to make sure you use a good wine, because otherwise you'll concentrate.
But the finest.
You concentrate all the bad.
We don't have a good.
Yeah, well, we don't have that kind of license either, so
Oh, that's true.
unfortunately. I definitely like a glass of wine every couple hours after 5. Okay, couple more strawberries. Now I'm going to use Hershey bars in this, but by all means, use your favorite chocolate bar. And another thing you can do, instead of just doing one big one, if you wanted to take the time, you can make small triangular ones, square ones, and these freeze great. So you make them up, you put them on a sheet pan, you throw them in the freezer, let them get nice and solid, and then throw them in a Ziploc. And I mean, you can just take out a couple, you want that night, throw them in the sheet pan, throw them in the oven, and you've got these wonderful puff pastry desserts. Actually, with the puff pastry, you can also use it as a savory dish. And you can put chicken and cheese and all sorts of other ingredients. And I also use puff pastry a lot for appetizers. I'll do anything you can think of stuffing in there. They're great.
Well, that feel, they're the king.
Yeah, except, now Vegas has gotten humid, but when I first got to Las Vegas 15 years ago, and the humidity was, 5%, 7%, it was impossible to work with phyllo. I mean, you take it out of the box and it turned into, curled up.
Just,
Yeah.
cover it up.
Now, there is a phyllo dough. I forget, the name of the phyllo dough is thicker. There's a phyllo dough that almost looks like puff pastry, and it's much easier to work with. Okay. And get our strawberries in there. And you can do chocolate chips. I mean, when I'm doing this, it's usually whatever the heck I have lying around. Here's the most complicated part. Says I might have won something. I'll have to have a look when you guys are. I don't want to celebrate in front of you.
Disney cruise.
Yeah. A free chocolate bar. And of course, if you're diabetic, you could certainly leave the chocolate out. And like Trader Joe's now has wonderful chocolate bars that don't have any sugar in them. My egg. Now, egg wash. What you want to do with egg wash is usually just a splash of water. And mix that up. Now we're going to use the egg wash for two different things. For one, it's going to be our glue for our lid, and then we're also going to put it on the puff pastry itself, and that's going to add a nice golden color to the puff pastry. It really doesn't affect how it cooks, but it just looks nicer. And if you got a little, you know what I'll do? Let's cut off this corner. And I'll just show you something you can do as well. In a minute. If you want to get fancy. So put your glue down. Take your lid out. And actually, just from the heat left on the stove, it's got a little warm and it's a little stickier. So it really is one of those things you want to put on the counter, keep away from any heat. And because once it gets too soft, it really just like all gets to be one big piece of gummy dough. Yeah. Okay. And just fold that over. Bring out your edges. We'll cut this piece off so we can show you what is a little technique. And then what you're going to do is go along with your fork. And really what you're doing is pushing down and pulling out. And what that'll do is combine the top with the bottom. And I've tried to do this on like a cutting board and then transfer it, and it usually becomes a big mess. So I highly recommend you do it on the vessel you're going to throw in the oven. And the nice thing about puff pastry is sometimes it isn't the prettiest thing in the world when we're doing it, but it has a way of turning pretty while it's in the oven. And you also want to do a couple little slits just as vents to let any steam out, and that'll help keep our puff pastry crunchy. Now here's what I'm going to show you. I mean, you can, if somebody's birthday or somebody's name or anniversary, or if you just want to make something a little bit different, what I'm going to do is cut out some leaves. And mark that down the center. And go like that. And then put it right into your puff pastry, into your egg wash. Pop it out like that. We'll give it a little bit of a stem. And these look actually really good when you do the individual ones. They really look nice, you know, if each one, because the decoration will be almost on the entire item. That's something to do with your leftovers, or if you just want to make it a little bit fancier. And I know it doesn't look all that pretty here. You'll see when it comes out of the oven. Okie doke. And then do our egg wash. You could use a a pastry brush on this, but almost every time I use a pastry brush, I usually have a bunch of brush hairs still left on the. So I like to use my fingers on this. Okie dokie. A little bear on top. She got some on the edges as well. What the water in the egg wash does is makes it a little easier to spread. That's why we put a little bit of. Okay, and that one's done. Now I got a 400-degree oven, and of course you want to preheat it, and that way you'll won't have to wait as long. And puff pastry, there really isn't a time. you really just want to have a look at it. After about 5 minutes, start looking at it every few minutes, and when it's that nice golden brown, it is to what your liking is, then it's ready. Now, what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to do a pomegranate whipped cream for this. And if I did look at the store, there weren't any fresh pomegranates. If there had been, I would have bought one, and we could add the seeds. That would even add another dimension to the recipe. Now we're going to whip some cream, and of course when you're whipping cream, you want to be able to open the container. That always helps. It's always the whipped cream ones that stick. They never open like milk does. There's you can always get the whipped cream out of the can. That would work as well. And there are some things you can do to make whipped cream whip faster, like a copper whipping bowl. I'm not sure exactly why that helps. I forget. It's been 20 years since they... Yeah, you can use your hand blender. Yeah. I like the extra size. Now, of course, what do you get when you keep beating your cream? What does it turn into? Huh? Yeah, what happens to it? Turns to butter, yeah. You have a little microphone system for tests at school? Columbus. Nothing wrong with that. It really doesn't.
I'm not a dessert person
Either it really doesn't take long to whip cream.
It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm like making this stuff.
Well, she made us make for my birthday. Now she wants us to make Rice Krispie treats. She's
Yeah,
never a baker.
that's big for me.
Now,
Said she's never a baker.
no, really? I don't bake either. This at this point, this is what we call a soft peak. You see how it's not sticking. I can't, if I move, it moves with gravity. And you keep whipping, and then you get a medium peak, and then the peak before butter is called stiff peak. And what we want is a stiff peak, especially since we're going to add another liquid to it, and that's going to soften up a little bit more. I don't mind a little extra exercise. And I hate cleaning those beater things. Especially when you do cookies. Actually, that's the whole reason they give them to the kids. Lick this stuff off. You clean up it better. So that's a medium peak. And it won't take a few more seconds and we'll get to the stiff peak. If you've whipped it so long that you have butter, I've never done that. I mean, I've never. Oh, really? I've never gotten to that point. Oh.
Just keep doing it. Just keep doing it.
Yeah.
You make butter rice.
You make some great desserts then.
Did you use the wooden thing with the old-fashioned way?
It was like little baby food jars, and it was for Thanksgiving, and we just passed around the jars.
Yeah, to shake.
Oh, okay. Now we're at what we call stiff peak, and in essence, it's not sticking there, but you
Yum.
get a little bit more whipping in there. Then I'll add our pomegranate concentrate. One of the neat things about this stuff, you get color, you get flavor, and you get sweetness. And I started reading up on the stuff, and it's got a lot of good antioxidants and stuff in it as well. And just about, and then you want to taste it. Now, usually you put some sugar in your whipped cream. This has some sweetness in it. And there's a lot of sweetness in our dessert. So you don't necessarily have to make something sweet with something sweet. So it's okay if it's low in sugar. If you're put it on fresh peaches or whatever. Fair enough. When that's done, we'll have a look at our puff pastry. It needs more time.
I was gonna say, that'd be hell of a quick.
I'll turn it on convection. All right, put it on true convection. Not just convection, but true convection. Do you guys have any questions while that's baking?
Yeah, I do have a question.
Okay.
I made a meringue the other day, okay? In my KitchenAid, it was lovely and it was thick and fluffy. Then I added fresh zested lemon rind. But then I thought, oh, I'll just add, instead of the juice, I didn't want it to collapse. So I added a tiny bit of flavoring, lemon extract. It was okay for the first maybe 15 minutes, and I was holding the dessert for at least an hour, okay? So I made it ahead, my base thing was cooled, I put that on, I put it in the refrigerator, in a cold, almost empty refrigerator, so it had plenty of circulation and everything. When I took it out, it had collapsed to almost this. So it just kind of went like this in 20 minutes to a half hour. Why? What did I do wrong?
That's a good question. Let me think. Well, the egg white's all protein, right? And did you add any sugar to your meringue?
Tiny bit, maybe a teaspoon.
Like
of
confectioner sugar?
Just, actually, no, real sugar.
Real sugar. That might have done it. Are
Instead
you any
of
good at
powdered
pastry? What do you think? The grain sugar might have done it.
But it was
Yeah.
absolutely great when it was done. There was no grains in it, there was nothing.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, that was incorporated.
Because what you have is little bubbles, right? I mean, that's what a meringue is bubbles.
Very
And sugar, like pure cane sugar, is a crystal, and so it's got a jagged edge, in essence. If you looked under a microscope, it'd be like little pieces of glass. That might have done it.
So it'd be better to use powdered sugar then?
Powdered sugar, and maybe don't add the lemon. You add the lemon to whatever the
zest.
dessert, or at the end let it set up and add that just before you're gonna.
So you wouldn't want to add that if you held anything?
Yeah, I'm thinking. I mean, lemon juice or the zest is almost pure acid. Oh wait, there's one other thing: is zest has oil in it, and oil also may affect it.
The collapse.
Yeah, that may have affected as well.
I threw
Yeah.
the whole thing out.
The extract would have alcohol in it. Usually extracts are, they're kept
Maybe
in
you
a...
have to do that and bake it right off instead of letting it sit.
Yeah,
for any time.
yeah. And now another thing you can do, I'm like I said, pastry and baking is not, a big, well-known subject for me. I got out of it as soon as I had my required credits and begged the dean not to make me take them all. I said I'd rather be a janitor than a pastry chef. So she goes, okay, you're pretty serious about not doing this. These are just different fields. I think it's cream of tartar. Is that it? You can put it in, and that will add to keeping the peak. So that might be something else you might want to look into. But I have a feeling, you've got oil and you've got acid, and then you've got the jagged edges. You might have just done a trifecta on it.
4 eggs, though, it was such a little minute thing, you wouldn't think that it would change it so much.
Yeah, well, that's a chemical reaction almost. I mean, that's the problem with pastry and that type of cooking is it is gram of this and a tablespoon of that. And that's why I can't stand it. I don't even own a measuring cup. I wouldn't know what to do. I hate measuring things. Yeah, I mean that's the biggest difference between the hot side and the line and the saute, and it's a different profession. It is so, and they're different personalities.
My grandmother ran the Hollywood Bank in 1940 to 1965, and if you were a great depositor, you got to go upstairs, and she had everything, and she did everything. I mean, she had people that worked under her, but all the baking and all the cooking and everything.
Huh. You mean if you deposit a lot of money in the bank, she taught you how to cook?
Well, actually, they gave you lunch, and she was in a very setting like this, very comfortable.
That's
very
funny. I mean,
nice.
banks give you flack. Is all they give you now.
Not today.
Big plate of flack.
But there's always money to deposit your money. People didn't trust banks.
Yeah.
So,
Now we just hate them.
Yes, it is. Yeah. All money done.
It's steamy there, but it's almost done. I'll get some plates together. I'll get one for our Sweetbreads?
Sweetbreads.
I love
Don't
sweetbreads.
you? And when you say that, people go,
I was in St. Thomas, and I met a gal, and I took her to a restaurant that's up on the hill out of Charleroi called Ferrari's. And she was pretty...
hammered.
Yes. Inebriated was the word I was looking for. And I ordered sweetbreads, and she was eating the sweetbreads, and she goes, "These are delicious, but it doesn't taste anything like bread." And I just keep eating.
It's a gland.
Yeah.
But they are lovely.
Oh, they
They're
are.
a bit to make, but they are lovely at the end.
Yeah, I let the French restaurants make it. It's not worth the hassle to me. It's almost like monkfish, which is a wonderful fish, but there's so much time in prepping it. Are you familiar with monkfish? It's also known as poor man's lobster, but it has that membrane on it, so you have to spend all that time pulling the membrane off, and it gets a little tiresome.
Oh, God, and you had to weight these things. You'd blanch them, and then you'd ice them, and then you'd peel them, and then you'd put them between plates and linen.
Right, flatten them out, yeah.
Yes, and flatten them out. And so you'd have, like, what do you have? You have a chair leg, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You've got this stuff and all this, so it doesn't drip on your floor and that. And by the time you get done, you're like this size.
Yeah.
But they were marvelous.
Oh, they're very tasty.
One of the most fun things.
We're just going to give it one more minute, and I'll be ready. Any other questions?
Just grating.
Just grading? Oh, how do I do? Was this have you've been to Vegas before, I assume?
Yes,
So is this a good venue?
definitely.
One.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Weren't around.
No, we haven't been open. Yeah, no. I was in culinary school 20 years ago. I want to be an actor, so I'm like, this is the last place I thought I'd end up 20 years ago. I couldn't stand computers then, and now I'm a geek. So I'm gonna say, I got it once I discovered the internet and video streaming. It was all over for me. Yeah, I couldn't live. I don't know.
Younger generation.
Yeah.
The older people don't like.
My dad's a geek now, although unfortunately he bought an Apple, and so he calls me up and I say, "Dad, I cannot help you. You can't even right click. How can I help you?" No. He's got I've got a brother who does. My brother does programming in a language that builds hard drives, so he's like way out there. And like we're both PC guys, and you go out and buy an Apple and then call us up for help. But actually, in a lot of ways, I'm glad. Because if he had gotten a PC, then I'd be giving him a lot more support all the time on how to fix things. Okie doke. It's ready. Isn't that pretty? As you guys can see.
That's beautiful. That's really.
Isn't that neat? And this is, where's our serrated? Can you grab me a serrated knife? This is one item that you want to use a serrated knife. If you just try to use a straight edge, what you'll end up doing is just crushing the puff pastry, where we want to sort of saw through it and keep the weight off the knife so that we get a nice clean cut and it doesn't look. But something like this, it's great for a party. You put out a big thing of ice cream, you cut it up, put a pile of plates, and just let people go to town on it. And it's how much easier could it be? To make. And you could do the same thing on the savory side as, throw some leftover chicken in there, throw some bacon, cooked bacon, some peas, a little bit of cream, you can do all sorts of things. And puff pastry is just such great stuff because you can do so many things with it. If you're using a raw meat, or say a raw, whether it be beef, like in beef Wellington, or say salmon, say you're doing a salmon Wellington, which you do want to do one thing, and that is you want a protective layer on the bottom, right under the fish. And we usually use what's called mushroom Duxel. And what you do is you chop up the mushrooms, and Cuisinart's great. You just puree them. You cook it with a little bit of sherry, white pepper. I was talking about all that moisture will come out. It'll come rushing out. And then just keep cooking and cooking until it's almost dry. And it'll look like a brown paste. And you put that under the meat, and so when the juice comes out of the meat, the Duxel will soak it up, and that way your puff pastry won't get all soggy in the bottom. So that's about the only thing when it comes to meat, if you're going to do. So when you're using your serrated, don't put a lot of weight on it. Just let a little bit of weight, and let the sawing do the job. Cut it through all the way there. And clean your knife each time, that way it'll look, you won't get the dredges of what's inside the puff pastry sticking to the top of the puff pastry. And you use your knife and make sure you can feel that you've cut all the way through. If you can feel it, you'll know you're hitting metal all the way through. Pastry down. And grab a spoon here. Our pomegranate cream. And I usually put it on the side because if I put it right on it, all that heat, yeah. And I should grab some mint today, and I forgot. Nice mint leaf in the middle will look wonderful.
Where do we get the pomegranates?
They're coming out, I believe, with a. This is set up for commercial. You can do the reduction of the pomegranate juice, and they should be coming out with a smaller bottle. This will last you a long time. It's a lot of concentrate. Yeah, and you could also use pomegranate syrup if you wanted to. It's very similar. Where this is natural sugar, there's a lot more real sugar in the pomegranate syrup. You get it, if like you'd make a Shirley Temple or whatever. So there we have puff pastry stuffed with Hershey's chocolate bar and strawberries and bananas. There you go. You guys want to try some of this? I got a little left over. You're welcome to.